So I recently learned something really interesting. Well, at least I think it's really interesting. And maybe you will too. Turns out that certain people are more inclined to take risks. Let's call them sensation seekers. When I heard this term, you can guess who came to mind. My fellow addicts, alcoholics, and substance users and abusers. Of course. I mean, it makes sense, right? We're basically the poster children for sensation seeking. So then I started wondering if, after getting sober or going into recovery, we still seek sensations. Basically, if we're still risky, so to speak, and if we are the type to still take risks, is there a way to mitigate taking negative or harmful or stupid risks and instead make more conscious, healthy, calculated risks? In this video, I'm going to tell you how taking calculated risks might actually be able to enhance your sobriety. First, I'm going to delve a little bit into my experience with risk-taking, both in sobriety and out of sobriety. I'm going to, of course, do the whole science thing and take a look at the science and the psychology behind risk-taking and maybe kind of how we can leverage this information. And finally, I will leave you guys off with a quick tip about how to apply this information about risk-taking to your life if you want to do so. So stay tuned to the very end, or else. Hi guys, I'm Allie, and I am a person on a path of discovery and recovery. This is the channel dedicated to going deep, living authentically, and having fun. In sobriety, of course. Wild stuff, I know. Every Wednesday, I post a new dumb quick tip, which is basically, oh, Poppy, Poppy, no, Poppy, okay. Come on, you could've went the other way. Okay, still here. Sorry about that. So yeah, every Wednesday I post a new dumb quick tip, which is what you're watching today. It's basically just something I learned throughout the course of my sobriety that I thought might be helpful for other people. And if you want access to a new tip every Wednesday, go ahead and subscribe to this channel and hit the bell so you get notifications every time a new tip becomes available for you. And with that, let's start the show. So I was always a pretty nervous kid. And because of that, I didn't take a whole lot of risks at a young age. Like, at least not the type that would benefit me down the line. From what I can remember, I was actually pretty risk averse. But then again, I can't really remember most of my childhood because trauma. I do remember wanting to do a lot of fun things that scared me, like joining a band or like going into acting clubs. Notice there's kind of like a pattern there with the entertainment performance aspect of it. That's why I'm here on YouTube at 30 years old. But we're not talking about attention-seeking behavior. We're talking about sensation-seeking behavior. So get off my back. And really, what is risk other than doing something that you're pretty uncertain about and maybe even a little bit afraid of, and doing it despite your own fear or even in the face of your own fear? Well, for one, it can be super dangerous. I didn't start taking what I consider to be like risky risks until I was around 11 or 12 years old. Unsurprisingly, around the same time that drugs, alcohol, and puberty entered the picture. That's when I started doing things like risking getting caught drunk at my own confirmation by fleeing the church early and getting drunk with my boyfriend at his house. Risking getting detention for skipping school so I can go smoke weed with my friends. And that makes sense, right? Alcohol and drugs lower our inhibition. And if you are a sensation seeker like myself, albeit a late bloomer, seeking the sensation of substances was probably only the first of many risky behaviors that you may have engaged in down the line. When I was well into my drinking and drugging career, taking risks was the norm, and that was whether I was under the influence or not. And after doing risky things so often and for so long, it kind of just became normal to me. I thought nothing of going home with strangers whose names I didn't know, and staying at their house for like an entire weekend coming off a binge, or taking drugs from random people off the streets, or missing work, or prematurely ending relationships, all hoping that whatever the consequences were from these actions would be worth the risk. In retrospect, of course, because in the moment I really wasn't thinking much at all. But what about calculated risks? Unlike a regular risk, Merriam-Webster defines calculated risks as a hazard or chance of failure whose degree of probability has been reckoned or estimated before some undertaking is entered upon. Basically, it's estimating your chance, failure, or negative consequences regarding a certain action, and then making a conscious decision while having an understanding of what might come from it and what might be lost from it. These types of risks, calculated risks. Intentional risks. And I didn't really start making any of those until I got sober. What did more calculated risks look like for me? As I've mentioned in previous episodes, a few months ago, I actually made the decision to leave the town that I was living in for almost 3 years to move back to Jersey City to be closer to my family and closer to my roots. It was a risk because I was giving up the network and the community that I had built in the last place that I was living. To start fresh, not necessarily somewhere new, but somewhere where I actually had a tumultuous history with, which could be even more risky. A lot of people told me that I shouldn't come back to Jersey City because this is the place that I use and I drank a lot. It was my stomping ground, so to speak. I knew in my heart that I was committed to recovery and that I'd find a new sober community, find a new job, and a new life, despite the fact that the one I had in the other town was pretty great. And speaking of jobs, right after rehab, I took the huge risk of leaving the corporate world, deciding that I no longer wanted to work in corporate banking, and decided to pursue my dreams of creating content about spirituality, sobriety, yoga, and things like that. I left my cushy job with a 401k, with benefits, with a great paycheck, with lots of perks, just so I can pursue my creative endeavors. It was a huge risk, and no, it didn't turn out exactly how I envisioned. I mean, the last job I had was at Trader Joe's, but if I hadn't taken the risk, I certainly wouldn't be making this video right now. And I probably would have spent the rest of my life thinking about what it could have been like, or if there was something better than spending 8 hours a day posting content to Facebook on behalf of a bank. Literally nobody cares what a bank has to say on social media. So let's look at the psychology of taking risks. According to a video by SciShow, there's 2 major components to taking risks, or more specifically to the personality of risk-taking people and dangerous risks. The first thing that happens is the logical, sensible part of your brain doesn't quite turn off, but the voice becomes a lot softer and you don't quite have access to it. And the second thing that happens, there's a loss of self-control, or you never really had a need to begin with. There's a lack there where there should be some self-control. Who the f is she? And the whole thing comes down to how much you want to experience some strong emotion, like excitement, euphoria, or stimulation. Is that an emotion? I feel like it is. So it comes down to how badly you want to experience whatever sensation it may be, on top of how well you're able to ward off your desire to do so. And as people who abuse substances, I think it's safe to say we liked the effect that our substance of choice brought to us. I mean, at least until really serious consequences started happening and the cons outweighed the pros. But still, even then, a lot of us kept doing those risky things out of habit or addiction or whatever else it might be. So once we get sober, does that mean that we just stop taking risks? It is possible that since we're no longer under the influence of drugs and alcohol, that we do take far less risks. But it's also possible that if we're sensation seekers at our core and we have a low threshold for self-control, which, let's face it, a lot of us probably do, we still engage in some risky behavior, even after we get sober. The good thing is, if you do find yourself as somebody who still seeks sensation, even after getting sober, with this knowledge of risk-taking, you might be able to channel that energy elsewhere, into taking different types of risks. Healthier risks, calculated risks. Now, how can we do that? Let's get to the part of the video where I give you a tip. Today's will focus on how to take calculated risks in sobriety. First, I want you to make a list. Yes, I know, I'm constantly asking you to make lists. What can I say? I have a very linguistic learning style. On this list, write down a bunch of the risks that you took while you were active in addiction, or while you were drinking, or while you were using, anything that you can think of. It can be anything from driving under the influence to stealing money from somebody. No judgment. Now, next to each of those items, write the emotion or the emotions that came from taking those risks, that sensation. Now, write the consequences that came from it, whether they're mental, spiritual, physical, actual, financial, doesn't matter. Something came from it. There's always a cause and effect. What was the effect of each of these risks that you took? Remember to be objective and don't get down on yourself. This was in the past. I understand that you're trying to be a different person now. So am I. We're good. You can't change the past, but you can, however, make better choices, and you can set yourself up to make better choices. I'm a living, breathing example of this. You're then going to make a second list of risks that you've taken in sobriety or calculated risks that you've taken in recovery. And whether you realize it or not, you've probably taken a bunch of calculated risks since you started your recovery process. The big one that leaps out to me is the decision to get sober in the first place. I mean, that is a huge risk to take. When you're so accustomed to comforting yourself with a substance, when it's become complete habit to you, the decision to let go of something that sometimes feels like your best friend is a huge risk. And it's scary as heck. To that, write what you've gained from it and what emotion came from it. Again, thinking about the sensation that came from it. Another calculated risk that comes to mind that I took while in sobriety was the risk to actually trust other people and trust other sober people, that they had my best intentions at heart and that they were actually really willing to help me and not take advantage of me like people in the past had. I mean, that was really hard to put my heart forth and forward and risk getting hurt. When you're done with both lists, you reflect on the benefits and costs that came from your risky behavior. The good risky and the bad risky. Keep this list with you so the next time that you're faced with a decision that might have to do with taking a risk of some sort, whether it's positive or negative, you can refer back to this, maybe even put it in your phone, and look through the sensations that came after the negative risk taking. Then look through the sensations that came after the positive risk taking. Maybe it'll help you jog your memory about what's to come, so you can make an educated choice and then have the opportunity to take a calculated risk rather than a kind of really stupid one. I mean, we've made enough of those guys. I hope this helps you guys. It's definitely helped me, and I would love to hear from you. So, if anything, comment below one of the biggest risks that you've taken, whether that's in sobriety or out of sobriety, whether it was a calculated risk or not, and let me know how it affected you. What was the sensation that you were seeking, and what was the sensation that you received? How did it make you feel? And remember, if you want to get more tips for sobriety, I post one every Wednesday. All you need to do is subscribe to this channel and hit the bell. You'll get notifications every time I upload new content. All right, guys, it's been real. It's been fun. See you next week.